Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Billboard Comics, another installment of our Crossroads of comic books and history. Dateline, July 25th, 1978. Jimmy Carter's United States President. Shadow Dancing by Andy Gibb is the number one song in the land. And moviegoers are going to see Grease in theaters. Pete Rose had just gotten his 39th consecutive hit, setting the National League record at the time. And Louise Brown was born in England. She is the first test tube baby, the first baby born through in vitro fertilization. This is a historic day, not just only for those reasons. It was historic because of Marvel team-up and Spider-Man teaming up with an incredibly talented team of individuals. The Avengers, X-Men, Defenders, maybe back in time to go to the Invaders. No, none of those. This is somebody you wouldn't expect to have in a Marvel comic book. Oh, Justice League, Teen Titans, Legion of Superheroes. No, no, and no. No. This issue was Marvel Team Up number 74, and it featured Spider-Man teaming up with the not ready for primetime players. In case you don't know, the not ready for primetime players was the official name of the cast of Saturday Night Live, which at the time this was published was in between their third and fourth seasons on the air. Saturday Night Live has just recently, as of last year, celebrated its 50th anniversary in the year. It's become an American institution. It's become imminently quotable around water coolers every Monday morning. In the meme era, clips and one-liners are on YouTube, TikTok, and a whole bunch of other kind of platforms. It has become a part of Americana. It's become a part of our fabric, our reality, and it doesn't look like it's ever going to stop. I don't think it's ever going to stop. But by the time you see this, the 51st season might have already begun. If not, it's probably going to be coming pretty soon. But back when this issue was published, the Saturday Night Live was the new kid on the block. The new hip, happening, cool kid on the block. We all know that if you want to know more about this, I've done me and Rich Dries have done a whole series on the Saturday Night Live over at Film Buff Online. I might put a link down on the bottom for that. It's a historic indication, but through this stuff I've been a big fan of Saturday Night Live, and I've become a big fan through doing that. But I was also a big fan when this issue came out. I don't know why I didn't get it, but I remember even back then watching them when it came out. I was like 6 or 7, so I was in no way should have been allowed to watch this. But nonetheless, my parents were, either incredibly negligent or incredibly indulgent, or maybe both. Saturday Night Live debuted on Saturday night of October 11th, 1975. It was originally titled NBC's Saturday Night because Howard Cosell took the Saturday Night Live moniker for his show on ABC, which debuted a week or two earlier. The first couple episodes are totally different than the ones you might see when you tune in this Saturday or next Saturday or previous Saturdays. It took a while to get on its feet. It took a while to get an audience. A lot of people were thinking that it was doomed for failure. People were hoping it was. However, it wasn't. It became incredibly hip and happening. Saturday night was often date night, but Saturday Night Live made people skip the date or go to a party or hold viewing parties just to watch the show. It became part of the public consciousness. The characters became incredibly famous. Emily Otella, the Samurai, the Lutners, goes on and on and on, and to this day. By the time this book came out, the book has always been established as being a cultural icon. It has survived the leaving of its most popular cast member, Chevy Chase, after the first season, and it was heading into the last season with original cast members John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, who would leave the series to go on to Hollywood superstardom. So it kept it right on the apex of the original cast, the acme, the high point of the original cast. It came about because Chris Claremont decided that he wanted to do it. He went in to offer the idea of having a tie-in with the Saturday Night cast as part of Marvel Team Up. He was a semi-regular writer on the series. This is at the same time like when he started getting his name known on the X-Men series, but he was still able to do more than one series at the time before he devoted all his attention to the X-Men books. The editor on the book was Bob Hall, and he went around with it, and he came on there. Both Hall and Claremont got the approval from editor-in-chief Jim Shooter and decided to work out through NBC and assorted agents and whatnot to make sure they could get the likenesses and rights to the sets and everything from them, so it could do an actually officially licensed kind of like tie-in. You'll see if you saw the cover pop up, you notice like in the cover it has Spider-Man, Stan Lee, and the NBC logo on it. So that's interesting. It was first floated in the early part of 1978, but it didn't actually come out, like I said, until July 1978. I guess because of all the I's dotted and T's crossed and whatnot, it took a lot of time to actually put together, write up, and drawn. Bob Hall decided to actually do the pencils for this. Mighty big of him taking that on as an editor, or maybe he had to because of the whole nature of like waiting to the rights get approved. He couldn't actually hire somebody to do it, and to try to get on as quickly as possible, they decided to actually, he had to step in. He was inked by Marie Severin. This is incredibly fortuitous. I don't know. I looked online to try to figure out like the whole story, behind the scenes, behind the music, if you will, of this issue. I have to imagine that she was added on as inker to actually help out Bob Hall, because with his editing duties, he's probably stretched pretty thin, but also because she's a very skilled caricaturist. She is, of course, the sister of John Severin, one of my favorite artists of all time, a man who worked for Mad and Cracked, and became like the lead guy at Cracked around this time because he had the ability to make his artwork look like Alan Alda or Gary Coleman, but also look like his own artwork. The same kind of skill went to Marie Severin. It wasn't all the cast members wasn't a perfect representation of them, but close enough that it was actually you can recognize who they are. And consider like some people might have a hard time actually doing the likenesses of that. I'm putting up Almo Grimm's cover to the Late Night with David Letterman issue up here now. But she did it very well. And considering you had two tall guys with brown hair in Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, you'd have to do something to actually separate them so you know who was who. The basic plot of this whole thing was basically that John Belushi got a package before the show delivered to him. It was a ring he didn't remember signing up for. He put it on his finger and he couldn't get it off. But unfortunately, this happened all before show's about to go up, so he didn't really have time to actually take it to a jeweler to try to get it cut off, or try to get some kind of lubricant to get it off. He was stuck on it because he had to go do his show. The show in question is being watched and visited by Mary Jane Watson and Peter Parker. They're in the audience. They said they had to wait for weeks to do this, but they had a fancy dinner in New York City, and they were late getting there, causing them to miss out on getting stage level seats. So they had to go up into the mezzanine section. The host for the show in continuity was Stan Lee. As you know, in the comic book continuity, they also have a Marvel Comics who do the adventures of the real life superheroes that populate the 616 universe. And I guess that's enough to get him on the show. The musical guest, which is never shown in the issue, is Rick Jones, who was a sidekick of the Avengers and Captain America and Hulk, who was known to have some musical talent to himself. So that's kind of like a witty nod to it. I'm a little disappointed because I know they did this because they probably didn't need to go through more hoops to get more rights, to get more likenesses. They didn't get like Paul McCartney and Wings, so they could do their song from a couple years before Magneto and Titanium Man. That's one of my favorite Marvel referenced kind of titles of a song. They're all here at this production of Saturday Night Live, but also is the Silver Samurai. Silver Samurai is the man who the original package was supposed to go to, but was misdirected to John Belushi, and he's there to infiltrate the page system to try to find out where the ring is and get it back, with a whole legion of lackeys. Hilarity ensues. Slowly but surely, the Silver Samurai tries to take out more and more people who work behind the scenes, pages, and takes over the control center and all kinds of stuff like this, all trying to track down who has the ring. This alerts Spidey's sense, and he leaves Mary Jane Watson in the stands to go try to track down all the people and fight crime and protect the cast and all kinds of stuff like this. That's the basic plot. I'm not going to spoil to you. It is on Marvel Unlimited, so if you want to, strangely enough, I guess whatever agreements they signed, licensing agreements they signed with like the cast and the network, it was pretty ironclad that they got reprint rights for it because you could read it to your heart's content on the online service. It's pretty trippy. It's pretty fun. It's kind of pedestrian. It's not exactly it's what you expect for a team up between like a bunch of sketch comedians and Spider-Man. It seemed like every member of the cast was given a chance to shine, to do certain things. Say, for instance, Garrett Morris put on a rubber Thor costume and pretended to be Thor. I believe it was out. I think it was outside, maybe. That who were trying to find a ring, and he stood on there with his rubber suit while they electrocuted on a metal fire escape. Stood under right people, like I think Dan Aykroyd electrocuted the thing, so electrocuted the guys, not killing them but just knocking them out, and so on and so forth. This happened. Bill Murray hit somebody with a rubber mallet, a hard rubber mallet that's made to look like Thor's hammer, and tried to infiltrate the bad guys. They found a way to actually do this. The final thing is a samurai showdown between John Belushi and his samurai character and the Silver Samurai. And I have to do one spoiler. The weird thing is that the bad guy wins in this one. I won't tell you exactly how, but he does. And that was, I thought, kind of odd for a comic book of today. It was interesting being a fan of the Saturday Night Live and fan of comic books, just to see how the two mesh and do it, and especially what they got right and what they got wrong about Saturday Night Live. Let me go over what they got wrong. First of all, the action takes place in summer. They're rushing into the thing in the midst of a summer storm, hence the whole thunder thing. However, Saturday Night Live doesn't operate over the summer. Maybe in a 616 universe it does, but usually in every other universe, the season premiere is in the fall. I believe the fourth season premiere was on October 7th, 1978. Stan Lee wasn't the host. It was the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones were the host and the musical act because the Rolling Stones were incredibly big in 1978, so they could be both. But that was the little thing that kind of took me out. It's kind of like, this is not right. The whole thing about like trying to get there early, maybe this was different. Again, I have caveats for all of these, so I apologize for the caveats. But me and my wife took a tour of the Rockefeller Center, and part of the tour we spent a great amount of time in the set for Saturday Night Live, and they gave us a whole bunch of Saturday Night Live trivia. Stuff I knew, like the fact it was done by, designed for a concert venue for a great conductor. I don't know exactly who it was. Name escapes me, but it's acoustically perfect. So if you see somebody on the show singing who is doesn't sound great, it's because he doesn't sound great. Because if you're a good singer, it'll come through because it's supposed to have perfect acoustics. But another thing was that the stage sets that MJ and Peter were in a rush to get to are reserved for VIPs, friends of the cast, other celebrities in town. People who might have some connection to be there, some agents or whatever. Or basically, just people who have a reason to be there outside of just being regular people who got tickets. The regular audience is where they were. Pete and Jay were originally sitting around the mezzanine. On the cover, they're called the Not Ready for Primetime Players, which is what they were called in season 3. But starting with season 4, they dropped that moniker, which is, you think like they might have been informed by that, because they make mention of of having Bill Murray come to the set for Weekend Update, and he didn't become the Weekend Update anchor until season 4. So they knew that ahead of time, but they didn't know like they're dropping the stuff. So it might be interesting some behind the scenes that was a last minute decision, or perhaps it was lost in the translation or whatever. The other thing that is really great for me, especially being in New York, and I again, I don't know this for sure, but I doubt this. I know it's a Broadway practice. If you've seen like the Spider-Man movie, people are not people are not seated in a performing venue while the show's going on. If you get Broadway tickets, you're going to have to wait until you are like in a mission to get to your seats. If you're not there on time, you're not getting in. Peter and MJ arrive during Stanley's monologue. So I can't understand like why they would be let in. It seems everybody's in there. A fun little cameo. They are sitting in front of Statler and Waldorf. How do I know they're Statler and Waldorf? They address each other as Statler and Waldorf. The Muppets that are up in the balcony that make snotty comments on the entire proceedings. That's the only reference to him. I wish they had a whole comic book of them making snarky comments on what's going on stage. But unfortunately, Disney didn't own the Muppets at the time, or Marvel at the time, so that was pretty much as they were willing to push it. But it was kind of interesting to see like this is a microcosm. It was silly and goofy, and less edgy than the actual show was, and it could have been maybe a case of seeing of things to come, because it used to go like Saturday Night Live has gone to silly aspects before then. But back then it was like the edgy avant-garde, on the edge, kind of like breaking boundaries kind of show. So seeing it as being a kind of a silly kind of slapstick kind of comedy in the comic book was kind of weird. It would kind of make me wonder like how they thought about it, but I would know that because Jim Shooter in his one of his blogs said that John Belushi called Marvel Comics asking to speak to Jim Shooter, and Jim Shooter's expecting like to be ready to riot act and like, how dare you do this, how dare you, why, and like, but Belushi loved it. Belushi apparently, according as how Jim Shooter portrays it, was a comic book fan back in the day, which John Belushi is one of my favorite comedians of all time, and the fact that he liked comic books makes me love him just even more. Also makes what would happen later even more of a waste. I'll get to that in a second. But apparently he loved it so much, so Jim Shooter invited him over to the offices, which were in New York at the time, so it's basically taking a cab ride over to meet the people who made the comic books and stuff, and like I'll be right over. So luckily, like, all the people were in there. Sometimes were freelancers. Chris Claremont usually lived outside or worked outside of the office, but he was in the office for that reason. Bob Hall was in there. He was in there. So they got a chance. They went with Belushi and toured around the whole things. Belushi proved how much of a comic book fan by going on. They have like production, like galleys of comic books up on the wall. It goes like, yeah, they're facing Adventures of facing Korvac, and I don't know how to get out of that. Captain America, man, Jack Kirby's back. I really love that. And going one by one through all the stuff like there, all the plot lines, to let him know he's actually a legitimate fan. It, like the one anecdote that Shooter says something that it was that Chris Claremont came up with the idea. He told like to John Belushi, man, you don't know how hard it is to do comedy, to write comedy. And like, Belushi took a beat and goes, yeah, I know. Obviously, because he is a comedian. So after that, John Belushi was put on the comp list for life for every Marvel comic. I would love to do that. I would love to be on the comp list for any comic book company for the rest of my life. I am pretty old. If you guys want to take me up on an offer, I'll throw your reviews on here and stuff like that, and billboardcomics@gmail.com. Just get in touch with me and make something happen. Prefer the hard copies if you do. Yeah, but John Belushi got lifetime subscriptions to every Marvel title, which might have been cost prohibitive if it wasn't for the sad fact that John Belushi would only be on this earth for about 5 more years after this meeting. He notoriously died of a drug overdose at the Chateau Marmont in 1982. He was the first of the cast to go. The second was Gilda Radner, who died of cancer in 1989. I believe the rest of the cast is pretty much alive and around and doing well, but the show went on to a very successful 4th season after this issue was published. And like I said, 5th issue, Belushi and Aykroyd left. I believe they were shooting the Blues Brothers. But after the end of the 5th series, all the original cast members were gone. And they started, so as with Lauren Michael, the creative head of it, and it started a bumpy up and down 45 years for the show. It's still around today. It's still around. It was basically making news about people who are leaving the show and being fired and let go, and new people coming on and shaking up stuff, and it's still of interest to people, and it might be one of those evergreen shows that'll keep on going on long after Lorne Michaels is gone and all the original cast is gone and everything like that. Marvel Comics, of course, is still around too. They are bigger than ever. They are, actually become big enough to actually be parodied on a number of occasions by Saturday Night Live. They're, I think there's before the movies came around. There's only 2 occasions I remember Saturday Night Live making fun of comic books. One was when Margot Kidder hosted during the first 5 years, where she was having a dinner party with all the superhero friends, and she's living with Superman and Clark Kent's coming in, and the whole kind of stuff it is. This is where, if you wonder why Garrett Morris had a cameo in Ant-Man, he played Ant-Man in this sketch. Another sketch I remember with superheroes being around the time of Death of Superman, where they had a whole bunch of people dressed up as superheroes mourning Superman in a casket. I think Sinbad was the host that week, and he was playing a disgruntled Black Lightning. I think the Hulk was played by Chris Farley. But since the movies came out, there's been a bunch of parodies. 2 to come to mind immediately is an Avengers parody where they mock when Jeremy Renner host, when they mock him as being Hawkeye, the weakest member, and I think one with when Scarlett Johansson was hosting, kind of like a romantic comedy between her and Ultron. By the time Agent Odo came on, so Marvel has become more part of pop culture and more on SNL's radar than vice versa nowadays. But that's an interesting part of the past. Do you remember that issue of Saturday Night Live meeting up with Spider-Man? Do you have it in your collection? Are you going to go rush on to Marvel Unlimited to read it? Marvel Team Up 74. Small amount of searching will be able to get it to you. Do you remember any of the parodies that Saturday Night Live did of comic books and comic book movies and TV shows and comic books? Let me know in the comments. We can start a discussion and have a fun time like this. If you made this far, I think the spirit of John Belushi is speaking to me. He's going, you need to subscribe and you need to like this. Whoa, that's amazing. I apologize to the estate of John Belushi and to anybody who is a fan of him like me. But yes, please, it helps a lot. Like, subscribe. It takes a modicum of time, and it's very easy to do. And I really, really, really thank you for it. All right, that's it for now. I hope you liked it. Until I see you next time, keep on collecting.